Hi there, my name is Jojo Mayer. I am a musician and I play the drums. Hanging out with friends and, maybe have a beer or maybe have a light snack, a tasty snack. Get my mind in a good place. That's really all I need. It's not the hands, warming up is good, but I think most people overestimate the effect of what the hands do. Warming up is more for your mind, to calm your mind down. You go blah, 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 blah. Your mind does something. It's not just the hands. So, this is something that I changed artistically, because I used to go, oh, what's the best warm-up routine? Oh, I do some molar strokes, left hand, do some rudiments to get my things going. And now I figured out, actually, I'm a drummer, I'm a musician, it's a part of me. And it's not, I don't need to warm up before I eat something, take some water, go, or prepare myself for it. I just go and I eat. And this is what I do with the drums. I walk on stage and I show people who I am on a good day or on a bad day. It's not always the same, but I try to embrace this philosophy of no, this is not I'm not an athlete at an Olympics that need to score points and need to be better than the other guy. No, I just go there and I share with people what's happening right now. And for this, I don't need to put myself into a condition that is better than what I am normally, That's for me, not for everybody, but that is how I do it. Well, nowadays, creating music becomes more a process that involves a lot of ambiguity, because I don't attach myself too much with a particular outcome. It's well, I have a basic idea. I'm going to go this way, not this way, and this way or that way. But granted that it could change, so I go into one particular direction, hoping to discover something that will enforce my instinct, So that's it requires a lot of tolerance for ambiguity and not be too much attached to the outcome, And I figured this is the only way how you actually can discover and create something new. If the gravitation of something that you already know and familiarity has a very, very gravitational force that can deviate you. And it needs some sort of practice to detach yourself from it. So basically always come back to recalibrating my mindset of I don't know anything and that's okay. And let's see what the next set will bring. So this has not always been like this, but right now, as I'm dealing with a lot of new technology, like generative technologies and all the new technologies that are coming into our lives, this has been proving the best approach. So if that answers the question. Well, okay, generative technology is a very broad field. Very, very broad field. So, we talk about music software, there's generative that runs in a program like Ableton or Max. And then on the other spectrum, you have AI agency, okay, which is very black boxy and nobody really knows really what's going on. So this is a very broad field. And as far as generative technology, what I'm using most of the time, I program things on Macs, and that has enough responsiveness to basically do what I want the machine to do. With AI, I have personally not found tools that allow me to do what I'm interested in, and mainly because of speed, They're not good enough for that. Like, you know, what I'm trying to express artistically, the tools that are available do not serve my creativity at all, you know. It only serves, it's like if I try to serve a coding problem, a programming problem, is like, then I can ask AI, can you create a program for me that does that? But as far as like the intuitive process of creating outside of the norm, I can't rely on AI, and I don't think we should, and I don't think we will, because it's not made for that. You know, like AI essentially relies on perpetual interpolation, and human creativity, we extrapolate, and we extrapolate in a nonlinear fashion, which is something that AI was not made for. So it's very important to understand that difference. That's going to be like almost like a life and death type of understanding when it comes to arts. And, you know, and I consider music to be art. Artistically, my ideas are informed by my values. Innovation is very close to my heart. You know, I was always like, I like the magic of like discovering or experiencing something for the very first time. A lot of people that's not important for a lot of people. They like to hear the same thing over and over again because it makes them feel safe and at comfort. But I'm kind of more of like the guy that I'm curious, and so therefore, I became that type of artist. So innovation is important to me, and it's a drive of curiosity. And with this comes, you know, values like courage, you know, empathy, as I said, curiosity, but also maybe, you know, certain strength that I want to bring into the music that I can provide, as far as like, yeah, my humor is a value that is important to me as well. So I try to bring those value into music. The stylistic surface of what it sounds like doesn't really matter to me as much. You know, this is like, you know, I love Bach, I love Mozart, I like Duke Ellington, I like John Coltrane, I like Hendrix, I like Aphex Twin, I like Angine de Poitrine, you know, like I like many different things. I like Pink Floyd, I like Alice Cooper. So for me, it's not the style doesn't do it, but you know, what's behind the aesthetic surface, which captures my interest, you know, and this is what I'm trying to give a face and articulate, so I can hand it over to the person that looks or listens at my art, and hopefully will make something visible that that person was not aware of. In the same way as my heroes provided me with something that I wasn't aware of before I actually was exposed to their art or their music. I see myself as being in the tradition of this. It's not either or. There are two different types of qualities. You know, working by yourself is more like a process like someone that writes a book or that makes a painting. Right? And that can be very intimate and very, very intense. And like what I do with Me Machine, which is the name of the project where I interact with those new technologies, you know, that's kind of like very much a deep introspective process. Whether with the band, we have a little bit more of like a social component, you know, it's called like, well, I had this for breakfast and you had this for breakfast and you didn't eat anything at all. I had 12 hours of sleep and you just had 2 hours of sleep because you were partying all night. So we have a different mindset and we have to make it work together. Okay, so that's brings in different qualities. And I'm not saying, you know, working with a band brings out different things than working by yourself. And either or, I appreciate both qualities. It's the same as like working in the studio or working live. You know, there's stuff that I really love about that process and something that I really love about this. It's not either or. I would say the way it affects me more in particular, you know, it's nice to hang out after the gig with the band, with your guys, you know. When you're by yourself, then maybe you go to the hotel and you read a book. No, I didn't deliberately choose a sound that I didn't like. Very often it happens that like I do something and it sounds like dog shit. And then I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Like, I don't really like this. Now, then you can go deep into it, like, and, you know, try to improve it and change the sound or do whatever it takes, you know. But there's another approach also that I start to embrace more. It's like, okay, this sounds a certain way. I don't say, this does not sound like what I expect it to sound. So if you embrace a sound as what it is, then it's not necessarily a bad sound anymore. It's maybe it's not what you expected it a couple of minutes before. Well, when I go like, okay, this bass drum sounds like a plastic bucket, then it should be fine because you can make music with a plastic bucket if you're a musician. You know how to do this. So I'm trying to, I think that's the moment where a bad sound can become a bad sound, which is cool, a good bad sound. And I'm a really big fan of that because let's face it, distortion on a guitar is not something that a guitar player wanted in the 50s. It was just an accident that happened by, you know, putting the amp louder than it was supposed to be. And today, they can't be rock and roll without distortion. You know, it became an integral part. This, by the way, is something that AI cannot do. Those type of, you know, this accidents, incorporate them as art. Right? AI can only remix. Yes, actually, many things, a bunch of things. Working with this new technology, you know, has brought me to some extremely uncomfortable places. One of the things that's, you know, basically it brought me to a place where I had to challenge my taste. You know, it's like, well, I like this and I like this and I prefer this over this, but why? You know, and this was brutal at points because I realized that maybe I like something because I discovered it at a certain time in my life where you know, I made a connection with this music. Maybe it was the first time where I experienced like teenage freedom, and this music came into my life. So I still associated with freedom, you know. However, that has more to do with the moment where I heard the music than the music itself, right? So one of the things that changed is that all my life I always felt or I believed that music is intrinsically emotional. And I'm not sure of this anymore. I'm not sure that music is intrinsically emotional. I think music, in order to be emotional, it needs context. So I started to become way more appreciative of a context where anything is happening, or a relationship. I'm not sure, I don't know it, but I'm not sure if music is intrinsically emotional. I think it depends on the environment where music hits you for the first time or for the 100th time. You know, the cabaret license was a measure that was installed by Giuliani administration, and essentially it was a ruse to control real estate, what happens in a real estate environment. Like, let's say that law was very old. It came from the Prohibition time. Right? So basically it means, like, in Prohibition, we had a situation where it was illegal to drink alcohol, you know, which is like, okay. And it meant that in certain zoning, you only have to have certain places where you can have entertainment, sales of liquor, etc., dance, nightlife, you know, bad things, you know, sin. Basically, it's about that, you know. Now, New York changed, you know, around in the late 90s, and it became safer. Like Giuliani was a police person, you know, so he cleaned the place up. He cleaned up the mafia, etc., and there was some good effects because it became really safe. However, he started to crack down on certain environments because rich people came in and they wanted to buy condos and they wanted to go into a hip neighborhood, and then they bought a place, they bought real estate, and then they complain about the noise. Okay, so it was like, okay, you can no longer have a party here, etc. So it was a little bit more complicated, but it really cracked down on the cultural atmosphere, and it was real estate. So what actually happened is it opened the gate for a new demographic of an audience for New York, which was basically the sons and daughters of very privileged people. And they came to New York to consume this mythological atmosphere that was created in the last century by cultural desperados like Jean-Michel Basquiat or Andy Warhol or Patti Smith, or, you know, whatever, like you name it, that New York type of thing. They try to consume this lifestyle without contributing anything to it. So basically, it just became a circus of like rich people. And also one of the reasons why I left New York, you know, because it's not a cool, not an interesting place anymore. It's beautiful. It's a amazing mythological structure, but the mythology of New York has cannibalized the city, unfortunately.
It's really sad.
The same thing is happening in Berlin now, you know. Well, by keeping myself fresh, as simple as it is. You know, there's not a magic potion or anything. You know, I mean, I'm fortunate enough that I have a good understanding of the physicalities of the technical aspects of like how to move with the least effort, you know, be kind of like consistent, and even if I have a bad day, like my hands know what to do, you know. So that's like just, I solved that problem decades ago. And as you get older, you know, as your thing doesn't naturally slows down, I can still pretty much play anything that I played 20, 30 years ago, you know. So that's when technique actually comes in handy, right? So, but everything else, the freshness is curiosity, sense of humor, a sense of courage to face it. You know, that's like, well, okay, I'm getting older, you know, like, what is it that I actually want to do? You know, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to do this. And I have the courage to stand by it, even if nobody cares for it, you know. The most clear change, it's getting simpler, much simpler. I need less equipment to express myself artistically clearly. You know, it condenses smaller. 2 symbols, you know. I use the anthology from Sabian, which I helped to design, which is like basically there's so many sounds inside one symbol that 2 cymbals, I can do everything that before I need like 5 cymbals, for instance, like that. And then my playing has been getting better, that I can get more nuance from a small kit. Of course, the computer, the augmentation of the generative me machine system, of course, brings in a whole orchestral side of my playing that, it's basically a computer that to a certain degree autonomously creates music. And that allows me to play differently. It's like I don't play with musicians. I haven't really found like the elevator pitch for like situations like this in an interview. I can tell people this is what's happening. But the best thing is like, imagine you had a solo piano player that had a piano that would like listen to what the piano player just played and make suggestions by playing by itself, and so the piano player could go, oh, okay, this is interesting, and I go with this. So it's almost like 2 piano players. But sometimes the piano would play something that, like a misunderstanding, where it's like, oh, I don't like this. Like the same thing was with the good and the bad sound. So I have to accept that it did that. Now I have to improvisationally react to the thing that I don't like and play something that basically puts the context that it's good anymore. Again, like John Coltrane once said, if you play a mistake, play it again, then it's not a mistake anymore. So again, we have to think with the context, which is very, very, very important. And once again, recontextualizing is a thing that only humans can do. AI cannot do this at this point. All right. So I'm trying to focus on the things that separates us from machines. That's why I work with machines. I don't try to replace people. I try to find out, is there any reason for us to longer exist or not? That's why I do it. Yes, actually, there was a bad habit. And the bad habit was that I was too eager to please my audience. So it goes with a fear that they do not like me, and I understand artistically, I know where the ropes are. I know what to do to get a reaction. So I get, kind of like, or, do some stuff that I know will get a reaction. Like that kind of clickbaity type of behavior. And that's a habit that will get you into a little artistic prison from where you start to replicate yourself, your behavior, because you're so scared that people might not like what you do. Now, here's the problem with it. There's no happiness in that zone. This happens outside. In control, you can only get to a certain point with control. If to really get the real high, you need to surrender to stuff that you cannot control. And you have to be able to exist in that zone without control. So that habit kept me trapped for way too long, and it's, I'm not there anymore. I'm much more kind of like when I go, okay, I'd like to hear a little bit more of like an open hi-hat right now, just because I like that, hear that sound. And usually when it works for me, it usually works for the audience as well, So I'm trying to feed myself emotionally when I play the drums, because then I believe it will translate, other than like the look what I can do, When I was young, like I sometimes practiced like 10 hours a day, and I'm the most undisciplined person that you will find. I'm really bad with like discipline, but I was obsessed with music and the drums. It was my favorite thing to do. So every free minute I spent there, because as soon as I left that zone, it's like the life quality went down. I loved it so much that I practiced 10 hours, 15 hours, crazy. Like if I look, not because I needed to, because I loved it. So there's a drive. And it's important to be aware what your drive is. You want to prove something, you want to become the best, you want to become the fastest, like you learn the technique. Man, if you want to get into this competition thing, become an athlete, because if you're successful, you're going to be making way more money than as like a musician, So I think find out what type of animal you are, and then like try to become that animal, and work on it and find out who you are, and then become that, the best version of that.